The message arrived at 11:43 p.m., glowing on a cracked phone screen in a quiet apartment where a single lamp struggled to stay awake. 3 words trembled inside that text like a whispered cry in the dark: "He hurts me." It was sent to the wrong number, by mistake, or maybe by fate. On the other end of the city, a single father who had learned to listen to pain long before it announced itself read those words, felt his chest tighten, and stood up as if the room itself had called his name. Some moments don't ask who you are or where you come from. They only ask what kind of human you will choose to be. Before this story pulls you deeper, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe kindness can still change lives, and that second chances sometimes arrive disguised as accidents. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The man who received that message was named Marcus Hale, a warehouse supervisor in a cold stretch of Ontario where winter nights pressed against windows like heavy thoughts. His life had been reduced to careful routines ever since his wife passed away 3 years earlier, leaving him with a 6-year-old son and a grief that never quite learned how to speak. Marcus lived between school drop-offs, long shifts, and quiet dinners where he pretended the silence didn't echo. He had learned how pain could hide in ordinary moments, how people smiled at work while falling apart at home. That was why the message stopped him cold. It wasn't dramatic or detailed. It didn't beg, it simply existed, fragile and terrifying. Marcus stared at the phone, his first instinct to assume it was a mistake, a wrong digit, a private storm that had landed in the wrong sky. But something heavier than logic held his fingers still. He imagined someone sitting somewhere shaking, believing they were reaching a lifeline, and instead had hit a stranger. He imagined what it took to send those words at all. Marcus typed back, not thinking, only responding the way he hoped someone would have once responded to him when his world collapsed. He told the sender they weren't alone, that help existed, that if they were in immediate danger they should seek emergency help. Then he added something reckless and human, something that surprised even him. He said he was on his way if they needed someone, if they could share where they were. The reply didn't come right away. Minutes passed, each one stretching. Marcus paced the small living room, glancing at his son sleeping on the couch, cartoons still paused on the television. He felt the weight of responsibility, fear wrestling with compassion. Then another message arrived, shorter, heavier. An address. No explanation. Just coordinates to a place not far from his route home. Marcus didn't wake his son. He wrapped him in a blanket, called his neighbor who had become family since the funeral, and asked her to watch him for a while. He didn't explain much. He didn't need to. She heard something in his voice and said yes. The apartment building at the address was old, its hallway lights flickering like tired eyes. Marcus climbed the stairs slowly, every step asking if he was doing the right thing. He reminded himself he wasn't a hero, just a man responding to a call. At the door, he paused, listening. The silence behind it was thick. When the door finally opened, he saw a young woman named Clara, her face pale, eyes swollen not from tears alone, but from exhaustion that ran deeper than sleep. No dramatic scene followed, no sudden rescue moment. Just 2 strangers standing in a narrow doorway, both scared in different ways, both understanding that something irreversible had already happened. Clara had moved to Canada from a small town in Europe, chasing a promise that slowly turned into a cage. Her partner, charming at first, had isolated her piece by piece, until her world was reduced to apologies and fear. The text had been sent in a moment when she believed she had nowhere left to go, when the walls felt closer than her own skin. Marcus didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. He offered presence, calm, and a plan. He helped her gather a few essentials, guided her down the stairs, and drove her to a late-night shelter where professionals waited, where doors locked safely behind them. The following days blurred into paperwork, quiet check-ins, and small acts that mattered more than speeches. Marcus brought Clara groceries when she found temporary housing. He connected her with local resources, legal aid, counseling services. He never crossed boundaries, never pretended to understand her pain fully. He simply showed up again and again, like someone who knew that healing often begins with consistency. Clara, who had learned not to trust kindness, watched him carefully at first. But kindness that asks for nothing slowly disarms fear. At home, Marcus's son noticed the change in his father. There was a seriousness mixed with a strange lightness, as if helping someone else had reminded Marcus that he was still capable of making a difference beyond surviving his own grief. He explained to his son, in simple terms, that sometimes people need help, and that helping doesn't always mean fixing everything. Sometimes it just means not looking away. The boy listened, absorbing a lesson that would shape him far beyond that winter. Clara's journey was not a straight line. There were days she wanted to disappear back into familiarity, days when shame whispered that she didn't deserve help. Marcus understood those voices. He had heard similar ones after losing his wife, voices that said strength meant silence. He countered them not with arguments, but with steady reminders that courage often looks like asking for help twice. Slowly, Clara began to reclaim pieces of herself. She enrolled in a certification course, started volunteering at a community center, and learned how to breathe without fear tightening her chest. Months later, the snow melted, and with it some of the heaviness that had settled over all of them. Clara stood on her own feet, not because someone rescued her, but because someone responded when she reached out in the dark. Marcus never considered himself the hero of the story. He knew heroes were quieter than that. They were people who answered wrong numbers, who trusted their better instincts, who chose compassion even when it complicated their lives. As you reach this part of the story, if it has touched something inside you, if it reminded you that small actions can ripple into life-changing moments, please take a second to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement tells these stories that they matter, and that kindness still has an audience. Just before we close, leave a comment sharing where you're watching from, or one word that describes how this story made you feel. Your words might be the encouragement someone else needs today. Years from now, Marcus would still remember that night, the glow of his phone, the weight of 3 simple words. Clara would remember it too, not as the night she was saved, but as the night someone proved the world hadn't given up on her. And somewhere between those memories lives a quiet truth. Sometimes help arrives by accident, through a wrong number, carried by an ordinary person who decides that doing something, anything, is better than doing nothing at all.